A long time ago, I was talking to a friend about Dragon Ball Super. This was back when they were still covering Golden Frieza, mind you. And he asked me, doesn't this Dragon Ball Super show have a lot of the same problems that Dragon Ball GT did? At the time, I actually defended Super. I pointed out that Super has had much more involvement from Akira Toriyama himself, so it's not as easy to dismiss as fan fiction as the DBZ sequel that came before it. That said, he did make a few good points, and as Super dragged on, I've started to agree with him more and more. For the sake of exploring my point, let's take a look at some of the glaring similarities between Super and GT. First, there exists something that previously existing characters knew about but never mentioned that threatens the Z-Fighters. In the case of Dragon Ball Super, it's the existence of Beerus, the God of Destruction. The Kai of course knew about him, and even Vegeta had seen him before, but he was never mentioned by any of these characters. To Super's credit, this is at least more palatable than a GT counterpart, which is probably why I gave Super so much slack for this nitpick. In GT's case, however, the existence of the Shadow Dragons is harder to explain. Why would Mr. Popo, Kami, and Dende all keep quiet as dangerous beings were slowly growing inside the Dragon Balls? If they didn't know, why wouldn't Shenron have at least mentioned it? Second, inconsistent power scaling. This was the one that really started getting to me as I watched and read Dragon Ball Super. In Goku and Dragon Ball GT, don't even get me started on Goku. Super Saiyan 4 Goku nearly dies from an explosion that would have destroyed the Earth. Goku has been fighting planet-busting enemies since the Saiyan saga of Dragon Ball Z, but now he's a billion times stronger than he was, and he can barely survive a planet-destroying explosion. I've always personally believed that Akira Toriyama has no understanding of how strong his characters should actually be, and this is a problem that dates all the way back to the original Dragon Ball series, but it's especially present in both of these sequels and makes both of them practically unwatchable for me. Part of the problem is that these series are still supposed to be, in part, comedic. So sometimes the writers just throw logic out of the window. This was especially true in Dragon Ball, actually. Maybe this is just because I'm a stick in the mud or because I'm older than the intended audiences despite being someone who grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, but I dislike when a show I'm watching decides to completely abandon logic for a gag. Especially when I'm trying to argue that one of these goddamn posers can actually beat Superman. What's that? Goku got taken out by a laser in Resurrection of F? Well, there goes that debate. I'm harping on this too much, it's time to move on. Third, bringing back an old villain and somehow making them as strong as the new Goku. In Super, it was Frieza. The explanation was that he had never trained before, and training got him to the point of being as strong as Super Saiyan Blue Goku, which was impressive, but I saw as pretty unfortunate because it basically retcons the existence of Cooler, who wasn't canon to begin with, but was always my favorite Frost Demon. Then in GT, we had Android 17 make a comeback for some reason. Then he fused with another Android 17 and turned into Super Android 17, which was somehow strong enough to fight Super Saiyan 4 Goku. I have a few questions. Why would Dr. Gero wait so many years to enact this plan to escape hell if Android 17 had been wished back at the end of the Cell Saga? Why would Android 17 help Gero when he had gone so far out of his way to escape being his servant in the past? I mean, I admittedly haven't seen GT in a while, so maybe these plot holes are explained and I just don't remember the answer. But seriously, none of this is making much sense to me. You may be thinking that it sounds like I'm being more harsh towards GT than I am towards Super, despite the fact that I'm trying to say that they're both equally bad. And this is because the similarities between GT and Super aren't actually what made me stop caring about it. No, this show paved its own path of mediocrity, my friends. It's true that the inconsistent power scaling really ground my gears for much of the show, but I think my single biggest problem with it is its own refusal to take itself seriously most of the time. Unlike a lot of series that have been sequelized off of their original, more juvenile stories, Dragon Ball Z included, Dragon Ball Super seems more than willing to throw dumb gags into every episode. Think about Battle of Gods, for example. Not an episode, but roll with it. Here we see Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, swallow his pride to protect the Earth against an enemy that he knows he stands no chance against. This is Vegeta, the guy who goaded on Frieza to transform and defended Cell from Trunks so that he could reach his perfect form. That same Vegeta is now catering to Beerus to protect the Earth, which he once sought to destroy. This could be a huge moment for Vegeta's character development, but instead, they turned it into a song and dance number. Do you not see how this show undermined its own integrity for the sake of shallow jokes? And I'm not against jokes. I love One Punch Man, and I think it's simultaneously one of the most funny and seriously emotional shows in recent memory. However, Dragon Ball Super isn't interested in telling an engaging story. It seems to me like it only exists because Dragon Ball Z was really, really popular. And that's a sad reason for a show to exist. Maybe the existence of truly great shonen like One Punch Man, Hunter x Hunter, and My Hero Academia has warped my standards. But I think Super just doesn't hold up by today's standards. And like GT, it only aspires to continue Dragon Ball Z due to its popularity. But here's the thing, I actually think Dragon Ball Z is a lot better than Super or GT. People treat it like this dumb, straightforward shonen manga, probably in comparison to more complex stuff like Yu Yu Hakusho, which is from around the same time frame. But Dragon Ball Z actually had more complexity to it than people give it credit for. The Frieza saga was a great example. There were 3 groups, all competing for the same prize. Frieza commanded the largest forces, so his group was the most powerful. Vegeta was stronger than most of Vegeta's soldiers while also acting alone, so he was able to act with the most freedom. Gohan and Krillin were the worst off in terms of a position of power, but they were the protagonists, so they were allowed to be in a bad spot to build tension. Seeing these 3 groups outmaneuver and overpower each other as they battled for the Dragon Balls made for what I consider to be the most entertaining saga in all of Dragon Ball. And I think most of the show, except maybe the Saiyan saga, has a similar property of being more complex than most people really give it credit for. I mean, none of it is like Chimera Ant Arc level stuff, but it's not as simple as Goku shows up and charges Kamehameha for 5 episodes, which is how some people describe it. I think there's an important balance when it comes to complexity between being simplistic and being convoluted. The problem with GT and Super is that they're too convoluted and break the viewer's suspension of disbelief, while Dragon Ball Z mostly sits on that nice middle ground. And the reason that both sequel series fall short is plain to see as far as I'm concerned. They're both cash grabs. Neither one has one iota of the sheer, inspired imagination that the original Dragon Ball had. They both exist just to continue making something that was big, and in both cases too little effort is put into actually making something enjoyable to watch. Bingo!